Liberal cabinet minister Harjit Sajjan is defending himself against allegations made in a Globe and Mail report. They involve his time as Minister of National Defense and his conduct in August of 2021 when the Taliban retook Kabul. The report says Sajjan instructed Canadian Special Forces in Kabul to rescue Afghan Sikhs. An operation military sources reportedly said took focus away from helping Canadian citizens and Afghans linked to Canada. Sajjan was asked about the Globe's report at an event earlier in Vancouver.
Let me address the Globe article quite directly, because I'll be honest with you, it was utter BS. Those who were following the evacuation missions and then events of previously to that know quite well that there was an approved government policy to safely evacuate as many vulnerable Afghans as possible, which included obviously Canadians first, those who worked with us like our interpreters, and it also included vulnerable Afghans, which included religious minorities like the Afghan Sikhs and Hindus. And I can assure you all effort was done to carry this out and do it in as safe as possible manner and to get as many people out as possible as well.
The CBC's Janice McGregor is covering this for us from Ottawa, and she has more on the Globe and Mail's report and how Sajjan is responding to it.
That's right. At several points when reporters were trying to clarify exactly what the minister did here, he, instead of answering directly with his own kind of voice, he referred people to a lengthy kind of two-page statement that has been circulated to the media since this morning and was given also to the Globe and Mail, and aspects of that included in the Globe and Mail's report today. No one is disputing that the Afghan group that is the subject of this story was eligible for evacuation under a government policy. The issue at hand was whether specific special forces resources were directed to sort of try to meet up with this group and facilitate their access to the airport, as opposed to other things that the special forces needed to be doing to facilitate the evacuation of other people on the priority list, which of course at the top is Canadian citizens, then permanent residents, then individuals in Afghanistan to whom Canada, its government, its aid organizations, its media organizations had a direct responsibility to try to keep safe, people who had worked as interpreters and drivers. The protection of other religious minorities who no one is disputing were vulnerable, visibly vulnerable. If you're talking about a Sikh living in Afghanistan, subject to violence, you know, that had been known for months by this point, that they were not going to be safe now that sort of the Taliban had taken over Kabul. Yes, they were eligible, but sort of there was kind of an articulation of sort of a hierarchy, if you will. And what the Globe and Mail was reporting, that through a direct intervention, a text message from the minister providing information to the military as a result of that, you know, military sources telling the newspaper that there was a lot of anger in the military ranks about having to sort of go and try to find this particular group of Afghans who weren't even Canadian citizens and didn't have a direct kind of tie to Canada, when they were trying to focus desperately instead on sort of others that they were trying to evacuate. That's the nub of the story, and I'm not sure that in his news conference today we necessarily got clarity. He was asked a lot about the direction he was giving the military. He said he felt it was appropriate for the minister to be directing people to follow the policy. I don't think that was in dispute. He was asked about whether he was providing information about any other groups who were trying to escape, and he said yes, there were a lot of people reaching out to him at that point, and they were feeding all sorts of information in, he suggested, but not quite clear if he gave other groups quite as much help as this particular group. And then finally, sort of on the issue of sort of whether there was anyone else who had this kind of direct kind of text message, again, he referred people to the statement, but the statement doesn't really address that. I want to show you we got a long statement from the Department of National Defense as well, because this, of course, is about the decisions they were making on the ground. In part, here's the key paragraph from that. It says all evacuation operations were conducted in accordance with direction by the Government of Canada and the Minister of National Defence. Orders were issued by the CDS and his operational level commanders, and they considered risks to carrying out these operations. One of the things we don't know is exactly who the minister texted inside the chain of command. His version of events in his statement is that he sent his information through the chain of command, that he was not meddling. The decisions on the ground were made by those in charge of the tactical operations on the ground. But we don't know kind of how it went up and how it came back down. Again, that is not a precision that is in the Globe and Mail story. What is in the statement and is included in the Globe story, and he said it again for the cameras here today, is the very strong view on Sajjan's part that because of his identity as a Sikh minister, these are particular allegations that are being targeted at him. Here's what he had to say on that.
To read that story and to take some of these questions, given that it was a approved government policy that we were executing, I'll be honest with you, I didn't think I would be getting those questions if I wasn't wearing a turban. And those who actually know me quite well, that throughout my careers and my service, I've rarely ever even talked about racism and what it actually meant. But I'll be honest with you, it needs to be called out.
So he's calling out that aspect of the story, but we still lack the precision as to whether there was some kind of favoritism or prioritization here based on a particular relationship that he had with this particular group. Again, this was a group of Sikhs that were not Canadian citizens or permanent residents, but there was a sponsor, a foundation in Calgary, that was prepared to privately sponsor this group as refugees to bring them to safety in Canada. I spoke with someone who was involved in that kind of chaotic effort to sort of hook them up with Canadian officials on the ground, who confirmed that Minister Sajjan is personal friends with this foundation. And from their perspective, they say that sort of they had no official process they could go to other than calling who they knew, which in this case was the defense minister. And in the end, they were left feeling very unsatisfied because the special operations soldiers were not able to reach them. The sort of evacuation was unsuccessful. They had to get their people out much later through another way.
That's the CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa.